Killers of the Dream by Lillian Smith. When the first edition of Killers of the Dream appeared in 1949, even its enemies, and it had made some, conceded that Lillian Smith had written a book which would become a landmark in American writing. Keen and clean as a polished sword, every word speaks because it reveals. This is the most telling book that has yet been written on the frightful handicap of race prejudice, a handicap, as this book proves, infinitely more severe for those who harbor the prejudice than for those against whom it works. Killers of the Dream, Chapter 1. When I was a child. Even its children knew that the South was in trouble. No one had to tell them, no words said aloud. To them it was a vague thing, weaving in and out of their play, like a ghost, haunting an old graveyard, or whispers after the household sleeps. Fleeting mystery, vague menace, to which each responded in his own way. We who were born in the South call this mesh of feeling and memory loyalty. We identified with the South's trouble as if we individually were responsible for it all. We defended the sins and the sorrows of 300 years as if each sin had been committed by us alone and each sorrow had cut across our heart. We were as hurt at criticism of our region as if our own name had been called aloud by the critic. We knew guilt without understanding, and there is no tie that binds men closer to the past and each other than that. To keep this resistance strong, wall after wall was thrown up in the Southern mind against criticism from without and within. We Southerners had identified with the long, sorrowful past on such deep levels of love and hate and guilt that we did not know how to break old bonds without pulling our lives down. Change was the evil word, a shrill clanking that made us know too well our servitude. Change meant leaving one's memories, one's sins, one's ambivalent pleasures, the room where one was born. In this South, I lived as a child, and now live. And it is of it that my story is made. I shall not tell here of experiences that are different and special and belong only to me, but those most white Southerners born at the turn of the century share with each other. I do not remember how or when, but by the time I had learned that God is love, that Jesus is his son and came to give us more abundant life, that all men are brothers with a common father, I also knew that I was better than a Negro, that all black folks have their place and must be kept in it, that sex had its place and must be kept in it, that a terrifying disaster would befall the South if ever I treated a Negro as my social equal, and as terrifying a disaster would befall my family if ever I were to have a baby outside of marriage. I had learned that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that we might have segregated churches in which it was my duty to worship each Sunday and on Wednesday evening prayers. I learned that while white Southerners are hospitable, courteous, and tactful people who treat those of their own group with consideration and who as carefully segregate from all the riches of life for their own good and welfare, 13 million people whose skin is colored a little differently from my own. I knew by the time I was 12 that a member of my family would always shake hands with old Negro friends, would speak graciously to members of the Negro race, unless they forgot their place, in which event icy, premonitory tones would draw lines beyond which only the desperate would dare take one step. I knew that to use the word nigger was unpardonable, and no well-bred Southerner would call a Negro Mister, or invite him into the living room, or eat with him, or sit by him in public places. I knew that my old nurse, who had cared for me through the long months of illnesses, who had given me refuge when a little sister took my place as the baby of the family, who soothed, fed me, delighted me with her stories and games, let me fall asleep on her deep, warm breast, was not worthy of the passionate love I felt for her, but must be given instead a half-smiled at affection, similar to that which one feels for one's dog. I knew, but I never believed it, that the deep respect I felt for her, the tenderness, the love, was a childish thing that every normal child outgrows, that such love begins with one's toys and is discarded with them. Though it seemed impossible to my agonized heart, I too must outgrow these feelings. I learned to use a soft voice to oil my words of superiority. I learned to cheapen with tears and sentimental talk of my old mammy, one of the profound relationships of my life. I learned the bittersweet thing a child could learn, that the human relations I valued most were held cheap by the world I lived in. From the day I was born, I began to learn my lesson. I learned it was possible to be a Christian and a white Southerner simultaneously, to be a gentlewoman and an arrogant, callous creature in the same moment, to pray at night and ride a Jim Crow car the next morning and feel comfortable in doing both. I learned to believe in freedom, to glow when the word democracy was used, and to practice slavery from morning to night. I learned it the way all my Southern people learned it, by closing door after door until one's mind and heart and conscience are blocked off from each other and blocked off from reality. I closed the doors, or perhaps they were closed for me. One day, they began to open again. I only know that the doors opened a little, that somewhere along that iron corridor we travel from babyhood to maturity, doors swinging inward began to swing outward, showing glimpses of the world beyond, of that bright thing we call reality. I believe there is one experience which pushed these doors open a little, and I'm going to tell it here. We knew we were a respected and important family of this small town, but beyond this, we gave little thought to status. While many of our neighbors spent their energies in counting limbs on the family tree, or in fighting each battle in turn, a battle of that civil war which has haunted the Southern conscience for so long, my father was pushing his 9 children straight into the future. You have your heritage, he used to say. Some say of it good, some say not so good. And as far as I know, you had the usual number of grandmothers and grandfathers. Yes, there were slaves, too many of them in the family, but that was your grandfather's mistake, not yours. The past has been lived. It's gone. The future is yours. We lived the same segregated life as did other Southerners. But our parents talked in excessively Christian and democratic terms. We were told 10,000 times that status and money were unimportant, though we were supplied with both. We were told that all men are brothers, that we were part of a democracy and must act like Democrats. We were told that the teachings of Jesus were important and could be practiced if we tried. We were told that radical is bad, silly too, and that one must always conform to the best behavior of one's community and make it better if one can. We were taught that we were superior to hate and resentment. That was a family commandment. We had family prayers once each day, and all of us as children read the Bible in its entirety each year. Against this backdrop, the drama of the South was played out one day in my life. A little white girl was found in the colored section of our town, living with a Negro family in a broken-down shack. This family had moved in a few weeks before, and little was known of them. One of the ladies in my mother's club, while driving over to her washerwoman's, saw the child swinging on a gate. The shack, she said, was hardly more than a pigsty, and this white child was living with dirty and sick-looking colored folks. They must have kidnapped her, she told her friends. Genuinely shocked, the club women busied themselves in an attempt to do something for the child, who was very white indeed. The strange Negroes were subjected to a grueling questioning and finally grew evasive and refused to talk at all. This only increased the suspicion of the white group. The next day, the club women, escorted by the town marshal, took the child from her adopted family. Despite their tears, she was brought to our home. I do not know why my mother consented to this plan, perhaps because she loved children and always showed concern for them. It was easy for one more to fit into our ample household, and Janie was soon at home there. And as time passed, a quick, childish, and deeply felt bond grew up between us. But a day came when a telephone message was received from a colored orphanage. There was a meeting at our home, many whispers. All afternoon, the ladies went in and out of our house, talking to Mother in tones too low for children to hear. When my father came home, Mother closed her door against our ears and talked a long time with him. Well, work it out, Mamie, as best you can. After all, now that you know, it is pretty simple. In a little while, my mother called my sister and me into her bedroom and told us that in the morning Janie would return to Colored Town. She said Janie was to have the dresses the ladies had given her and a few of my own and the toys we had shared with her. She asked me if I would like to give Janie one of my dolls. She seemed harried, though Janie was not to leave until the next day. She said, "Why not select it now?" And in dreamlike stiffness, I brought in my dolls and chose one for Janie. And then I found it possible to say, "Why is she leaving? She likes us. She hardly knows them. She told me she had been with them only a month." "Because," Mother said gently, Janie is a little colored girl. But she's white. No, we were mistaken. She is colored. But she is colored. Please don't argue. What does it mean? I whispered. It means, Mother said slowly, that she has to live in Colored Town with colored people. But why? She lived here 3 weeks and she doesn't belong with them. She told me so. She is a little colored girl. But you said yourself she has nice manners. You said that, I persisted. Yes, she is a nice child, but a colored child cannot live in our home. Why? You know, dear, you've always known that white and colored people do not live together. Can she come to play? No. I don't understand. I don't either, my young sister quivered. You're too young to understand. And don't ask me again, ever again. Mother's voice was sharp, but her face was sad. And then I went out to Janie, who was waiting, knowing things were happening that concerned her, but waiting until they were spoken aloud. I do not know quite how the words were said, but I told her that she was to return in the morning to the little place where she had lived, because she was colored, and colored children could not live with white children. Are you white? She said. I'm white, I replied, and my sister is white, and you're colored. And white and colored can't live together because my mother says so. Why? Janie whispered. Because they can't, I said. But I knew, though I said it firmly, that something was wrong. More than 30 years, the experience was wiped out of my memory. But that night and the weeks it was tied to worked its way like a splinter, bit by bit, down to the hurt places in my memory, and it festered there. And as I grew older, more experiences collected around them, faithless time, that as memories of earlier, more profound hurts crept closer, drawn to that night, as if to a magnet, I began to know that people who talked of love and children did not mean it. That is a hard thing for a child to learn. I still admire my parents. There was so much that was strong and vital and sane and good about them. And I never forget this. I stubbornly believe in their sincerity. I do this to this day, and I love them. Yet in my heart, they're under suspicion. Something was wrong. Something was wrong with a world that tells you love is good and people are important, and then force you to deny love and to humiliate people. I knew, though would not say it for years out loud, that in trying to shut out the Negro race away from us, we have shut ourselves away from so many good, creative, honest, deeply human things in life. I began to understand slowly at first, but more clearly as the years passed, that the warped, distorted frame we have put around every Negro child from birth is around every white child also. Each is on a different side of the frame, but each is pinioned there. I knew that what cruelty shapes and cripples the personality of one is as cruelly shaping and crippling the personality of the other.